Wait, are you going to do your...
Yeah.
We're recording.
Must have been an angel
episode
by
are we on?
myself.
Action.
We're live! All right.
Right, George.
What's going on,
Hey.
George? I feel weird calling you George. I'm going to have to call you Georgina.
Alright.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know. Or Principal.
Principal works.
Principal work.
Principal G.
No, I don't mind Georgina. I think Georgina works better in Cyprus. I think
It
people
does.
find George odd. It's a boy's name.
Yeah. I mean, it is a boy's name, isn't it?
That's what my dad says, yeah. Go ahead, George.
Did your dad want a son?
Yeah.
Or Gorgos.
No, he just doesn't like people using the nickname George.
Okay.
It's a boy's name.
Oh, your dad doesn't like it.
No,
I thought
no,
your
no,
dad
no,
called
no,
you
no,
George
no,
because
you're-
maybe you
yeah,
wanted a
you're-
son.
Yeah.
Georgina.
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 With a T.
Yeah. With a T. Where?
That's how they spell it. It's Georgina with a T.
Georgina.
Georgina.
George.
Okay.
Anyway.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast, episode 7. You nearly confused me because you said 6. Episode 7. Really excited to be here again once again. And Georgina, who are you?
Who am I? Georgina. I am a principal at the American Academy in Larnaca.
Woo!
Anything else about me?
Very excited to have you on the show.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm
excited to be here.
a bit nervous speaking to you.
You're nervous?
Yeah, you sound like a principal. You
In
have
what-
that like.
In what way?
I don't know. You have this like authority figure of a voice. I don't know.
I'm
I
going
feel
to
like
tell
I'm.
you off.
I mean,
At any point.
well, I feel like I'm going back to school a little bit. It's
Oh.
weird. All these crazy emotions are coming.
Okay.
So I used to have like coffee with the principal every morning because I was
In
just,
trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. It used to be like go class and then U-turn, go see Mr. Nick.
Okay. Mr. Nick.
Mr. Nick. Maybe try and get him on the show. Actually, I did see him in Nomad
Yeah.
having a coffee, and I was like, "You want to come on the show?"
You
He's
should
like,
bring him in.
"Maybe."
He's cool, actually. He's a lot different now than back when we were
I wouldn't
kids.
call him cool, but he's all right. I see you. All right, cool.
So, George, you're the first female guest on our show, by the way.
Oh
Am
my
I
God,
really?
yeah.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Which
that's
is
brilliant.
bad on us.
It is
I was
bad
gonna
on us.
Because
say-
we're
I
like
was
17
gonna say.
episodes deep and we're
It's episode 7.
episode 7 of season 2.
Nah, it doesn't count.
And
It's
then
in the
Nick.
past.
We're-
In the
So,
past.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's
But
great.
you're the first, and we'll obviously have a lot more female
Breaking
guests.
new ground, but yeah, boys, come on now. I mean, it shouldn't have taken this long.
I promise you the second person we're going to interview after you, we won. So, yeah,
Okay.
just thought I made that clear. Yeah, it's actually fantastic that you're here.
Thank you. It's
we
nice
have
to be here.
so many questions about, in your role and also what kind of brings you into making that decision.
Okay.
To be, I'm actually really nervous
Well,
for the first time.
I mean,
I've
first,
just got so
I think
many
that
things in my
my
head.
first question, we were speaking about gender as well.
Mm-hmm.
How is it being a female head teacher in Cyprus? Or a female head teacher in general, not just in Cyprus?
A female head teacher. I don't think it's that big a deal, actually, being a female head teacher. I think education is quite a female driven industry. I think you'll find more women in teaching, more so in primary, but you'll find more women in teaching, more women in education. I think even in Cyprus, I mean, particularly across the private schools, you'll find almost as many female senior leaders and head teachers as you will men. I think what's probably different about me is that I have a young family, and normally, men will progress regardless of whether they have children or not, and I think that it can be quite easy for them to do so. I think for women, they often get into senior leadership either after they've had kids or they go into it with children, and then it's really difficult to progress. So even at my last school in London, almost every woman who had kids and was on the leadership team ended up having to move schools. I mean, it was a great school, but the job didn't allow for people to really, give to their families, and they ended up making the decision to leave. So I think being a female head teacher is not that unusual in 2023. Being a female head teacher in Cyprus is, not that big a deal. But being perhaps a little bit younger and having a young family, I think that's the bit that's probably quite unusual.
Why do you think there's more women in teaching?
I think it requires certain characteristics, certain social skills that I'm not saying men don't have them, and our male colleagues are just as wonderful as our female colleagues, but I think it attracts women more than it attracts men. Just like certain healthcare, for example, is another area,
Like
another
nursing.
industry. Yeah.
Is that because like you feel like women are more naturally like teachers? They're more naturally giving. They care more. They have this motherly instinct to, protect and care. And then in your way, the protection is by teaching.
Yeah, I don't think it's that they care more. I think they find communication easier. I think they're more naturally empathetic.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think you need to have that as a teacher, firstly, when you're actually teaching, because you're a master of the subject that you're teaching. You know it inside out, and you're having to explain it to somebody who has no idea what you're talking about, and you're having to break it down, and you need to remind yourself, and you need to really empathize with their lack of understanding to get them to that point that you want them to be. And then the second thing is obviously the kind of personal and emotional aspect, that you need to understand how they feel. And children, from when they first enter education at 2, 3, 4 years old, all the way up to 18, they're going through so many changes that we as adults might understand. Oh, I remember that. Oh, I know why you feel that way. But they don't, and they're constantly changing. So I think you need to have that empathy to deal with their different behaviours and their different needs. And it's not that men don't have those skills. They do, of course they do. Men care just as deeply as women, but I think it often comes more naturally to women. And so traditionally, I think education has been quite a female industry.
Mm-hmm. See, I never really thought of it until just now, actually, because women are, in my opinion, in my experience, a lot more open. They're a lot more open with their emotions. They talk a lot more, no pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
They do. And I think that is because they're able to express themselves much better.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the way I used to see it, like most of our teachers in school were women as well. And then the principal were men. Yep. So it's weird because you felt more comfortable talking to your teacher than the principal, because you used to see the principal as a very tough man and, very strong and also very strict, and you couldn't really get across that, the information, whereas your teacher would have more time for you personally as a one-on-one. So I think that's also a good thing, as being a principal, to be able to have that communication skills and be more open is much better.
I think so. I think also for many households, even now, the woman, the mother, has a bigger role at home, and I think teaching kind of allows for that, because you leave. Okay, you have work to do in the evenings, of course, but you'll leave, school towards the end of the day, so you still get time to pick up your children, spend time with your children. You get school holidays. Again, you're working during holidays.
You get great holidays.
We do get good
Don't
holidays.
lie, you probably went into it for the holidays.
Is that 3 months in the summer or 2.5 months in the summer?
Schools don't get the same holidays,
They
but
don't.
no, teachers get good holidays. But they do work for it. They do. I mean, I've had this my entire career. People are like, oh, you're on holiday again, but they do really work for it. And I liken it to, it's almost like the school year is like training for a marathon, where you really, really, really train, and then you do your marathon, and then you're just flat out and you need to physically recover. And teachers during the year, I mean, in the UK recently they did a study, and the average teacher is working 50 hours a week, the average. So for every person that's only working 40, there's someone that's working 60. So you put in those hours in the evenings, on the weekends, during the holidays. I mean, most teachers will work during the holidays, because teaching is quite a unique, I think, profession, in that in order to be ready to do your job when you get to work, you have to have done work before you start work. And then if you're going to be really good tomorrow, you need to go home and do more work based on the work that the children just created.
I think that should apply to everything,
cycle.
right? Shouldn't that apply to, like, if you want to be good at your job, you need to be a bit prepared before you go in, and then prepare the night before?
Yes, I agree. But
Because not all teachers put in that work
Yeah, for sure.
during the non-working hours.
If I had 6 lessons to prepare for tomorrow, I would have to prepare individually for each one. I would sit down at my laptop, I would, check the class list, I would plan my slides, I would prepare my resources. If you had 6 haircuts tomorrow, you wouldn't sit down and go, right, who's this client? What are their needs? How can I prepare? Right, let me make that. Okay, what about the next one? Because you've got those skills, and actually you can just apply them in the moment. Whereas with teaching, you've got to put so much work in before you even get into the classroom. And then if those lessons, whether they go, well or not, you'll need to then leave and go, right, how did that lesson go? Let me reflect on it. What do I need to do tomorrow to fill the gaps of today? What work did they produce that I need to mark to make sure that everything's up to date so that we can move forwards tomorrow? So it's like I think people just see that we kind of rock up at 7:30 and then skip on out. I mean, in Cyprus, you know,
Shaking the iced latte.
1:30 and we're out. But actually, if you're a good teacher, and most people are there for the right reasons, and they're good teachers. If you're a good teacher, you're putting the prep in order to do your job properly. You know, teenagers can be quite a discerning bunch. You're not just going to rock up and be like, right, guys, what should we learn today? You know, they care about their education. They want to do well. They know when you don't know what you're talking about. And you don't want 25 teenagers, you know, looking at you. It will be a very difficult crowd to control if you're not prepared. So you've really got to put that work in.
Okay. So in your opinion, what are the qualities of a good high school principal? What do you need to have to make you the person that you are for your role?
Empathy, vision, resilience.
These are all big words, isn't it? I love it.
I mean, do you want me to elaborate?
All right. 1-0, fair enough.
Organisation, for sure. People skills. Compassion. I think you need to have, I mean, this isn't a word, but you need to have done different roles within a school. I mean, I progressed relatively quickly, especially, you know, for Cypriot standards. But I think if you're going to manage someone and you're going to guide them and and support them, you need to have an idea of what their job's like. You know, if you're going to direct teachers, you need to have taught. If you're going to work with heads of faculty or heads of department, you need to have done that role. So you need to understand the different levels of a school. You need to be quite financially minded. I mean, the school budget is a big budget, and if you get it wrong, you know, you can...
You're in charge of the school budget?
Along with our CEO, but I manage the senior school budget, yeah.
So is that every principal's role?
Normally.
Really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
I mean, payroll might be controlled elsewhere, and that's a big part of your school budget, but no, you need to manage your budget. Promotion and advertising, I mean, that's something that's been quite new to me, moving to Cyprus. In London, if you work for a good state school, you will get your numbers, and then people will just come and visit. You've got Ofsted reports, whatever. In Cyprus, you'll see a lot of schools being advertised, so you've got to have an understanding of marketing, I guess, and promotion.
So obviously, when you decided to become a teacher, you know that was the career path you wanted to choose after university, after your masters.
Mm-hmm.
Did you think you would become a head teacher at some point, or was that in the plans, or was it like, okay, I love kids, I want to educate the world, and then at some point maybe I'll become a head mistress? A head teacher. We shouldn't use head mistress these days, apparently.
No, head teacher.
Head teacher or principal. Like, when did that switch and you think, okay, I can do this, or I want to do that at some point in my life?
I didn't actually know that I wanted to be a teacher when I was younger. Now that I look back, I think, and I look at my parents and I think, how did you not know? Because I was always, I'm the eldest in my family, and normally the eldest likes to kind of boss around the younger ones and play teachers, but I was really into it. I mean, we used to fly to Cyprus every summer, and I would make workbooks and this is before like the internet. I would hand make workbooks for my siblings, and they'd have a maths page, an English page.
I bet you were so much fun. Sounds horrible.
But when you're young, you love that stuff.
Course,
no, we had fun. Okay, I was a bit bossy. You'd have to get them on an interview.
You say we had fun. I'll have to ask your siblings, to be honest.
Get them in, ask them about their trauma. But I used to love, explaining things and teaching. But actually, when I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut for a while. I think a lot of people did. I wanted to be a backing dancer for Janet Jackson. That was big. And I wanted to be a doctor.
Wait, what was the transition from astronaut to backup dancer for Janet Jackson?
I was obsessed with space. Like a lot of kids are, absolutely obsessed, fascinated by it.
I still am. I don't understand it. I look outside, I don't get it.
It freaks me out.
But
I was, and my dad was very kind of encouraged. Yeah, you can be the first astronaut that Cyprus has ever had. Why not? I
love that, innit? Like, you just give your kids dreams.
Yeah, I mean,
until they realise it's impossible.
No, it's not that realistic.
Become an accountant.
I loved music, loved dancing, so that was plan B. I was good at maths, good at economics, didn't know what to do. My dad did actually quite stereotypically kind of guide me into accounting. It's like, why don't you be an accountant? You know, you're good at maths, you're good at it's a good vocational course. And I think that is the Cypriot way, isn't it? You know, doctor, lawyer, accountant, tick, tick, tick.
It's changing.
And my dad, with, you know, the best intentions, directed me down that path. And that was the degree that I did. And I absolutely hated it. Like, I really didn't like, you know, a shout out to all the accountants out there, but I did not like accounting. I didn't like it. It just wasn't, it wasn't for me at all. And, you know, I was in my final year of uni thinking, like, what on earth am I going to do with my life? Like, I don't want this to be my life at all. Like, I just found it really boring and not rewarding. And I lived in Birmingham at the time. I was at uni there, and I went to, there was this like government scheme where they were trying to get undergraduates into schools to kind of help out and try and get them to become teachers. There's a shortage of teachers in the UK. So I applied, and I went to this school in Birmingham that was, it was like a transitional school for children that were that were being reintegrated back into education, or were coming out of like juvenile delinquents, basically. Okay. So it was rough. Like, it was terrifyingly rough. Like, the lady that answered the door to me on the first day had her arm in a sling because a kid had smashed it in a door. Where am I? And I'd led quite a sheltered childhood, like, you know, Cypriot family, shelter their children very much in the UK, went to a nice private school, and I had never really, and then went to uni, so I'd never really encountered the kind of young people that I was suddenly meeting, and I absolutely loved it. Every Sunday, I couldn't wait to go back, and I thought I never had this level of excitement, you know, for my 2-hour corporate accounting lectures.
That excitement comes. Sorry to interrupt. That excitement come from you being able to change that behavior by you knowing that you're making a difference.
Look, I'm not going to pretend that I just walked in, you know, like the Messiah and started changing behaviors like left, right, and centre with no training.
Because if I saw someone with a broken hand, I wouldn't really be that excited to go back.
I found it really rewarding. I mean, they were
at a personal level.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm sure there were people that would have looked from the outside in and said, "Oh, these kids are rough. They're really bad." But they're young people. They're vulnerable young people. Some of them had, you know, had a really poor start in life, didn't have much guidance, didn't have a support network at home, had really negative experiences that affected the way that they behaved. I found it really rewarding. It was terrifying at times. I mean, I was thrown into this, like, I had to do a PSHE, like, drugs talk, and they gave me this PowerPoint, and I was sat there thinking, these kids know so much more than I do. Like, how am I sat here trying to talk to them about, like, so... But I really enjoyed it. And I was working in the maths department, sat with kids who couldn't count backwards at the age of like 15. I mean, they'd missed so much education. They were so disengaged. And maths, I think, it can feel like quite an inaccessible subject if you don't understand it. So, you know, there's some subjects where you can just throw yourself in, and it doesn't really matter if you're not doing well because you enjoy the process. Like art, I was terrible at art, but I love doing it. If in maths, if you're not very good, you're just wrong. And then that affects how you feel about yourself and your ability. So they were just so disengaged. And I found even the smallest win, someone saying, "Oh yeah, I get it now," it made me feel good. You know, it's not like, oh, I was just there trying to help the world and educate the world. I enjoyed it. There was also part of it that was for me. And I thought, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do. I told my parents. Dad wasn't happy. But then I applied. I got into Cambridge to do my teacher training. Dad was happy.
Just throwing out Cambridge out there like it's nothing.
And it was an incredible place to train, though. Really, really good place to train. Really good teachers, really good environment. Did my teacher training, did my masters, and I was really happy being a teacher. And when a job came up for head of department, I was like, no, I'm quite happy just being a teacher. And then I thought, no, I'm going to try it because there's things that I don't agree with. There's things that I think could be done better. So why can't I be the person to do that? So I applied, got the job, moved to London, became head of department, really happy doing that. And my boss at the time was like, there's an opening for assistant principal, you know, do you want to go for it? And I was like, no, I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing. And then again, I started thinking, I could just give it a shot, right? Like, just go through the process. And the things across the wider school, not just in the maths department, that I think could be improved or that I want to have an impact on, I might be able to change and contribute. So I applied, got the job, never wanted to be a principal. And I used to say to my old principal, I don't know how you do what you do. And being a head teacher in England is difficult in a different way. There's a lot of police, there's a lot of social services. It's really mentally and emotionally draining. And I was like, I'm just really happy doing what I'm doing. And then, but I wanted to move to Cyprus. And I think education in Cyprus is quite different. The working environment's quite different. We had my daughter at that point, and I knew I didn't want to raise her in the UK. So a job came up over here, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. You know, I think I'm ready. It's a good school, and got a job. And that was it. So I never, you know, dreamed of being a principal. It was just that every time I'd get to the next step, I'd think, yeah, okay, I think I could push myself a bit more, actually. I think I've got more to give in a different space. So
makes me so happy to hear that. I mean, just when you hear people's stories and how they got to where they got to, you've told us in the space of like 5 minutes your whole life story of what you've done right now.
Yeah, that was longer than 5 minutes.
But like, I kind of lived it with you, to be honest. And it's nice to hear, you know, your path and your journey coming up to the place where you are now. I think you should be very proud of yourself. And it's always good to kind of chase what you want to. And despite what your parents want for you, because I've always said this, your parents want what's best for you, but that doesn't mean they know what's best for you.
I agree.
At the end of the day, if you've got the passion and you've got the vision and you know what needs to be done, then by all means, you go ahead and do it. And I think that's very important, and to be able to get to your position, and hopefully everyone listening as well, you have to choose your own path. Of course, your parents and your friends are going to guide you, but you're the only one that's going to put the work in to do it. And obviously, going through these different experiences will change you as a person. Going in through something that's a bit more sheltered and bubbled, like a life in Cyprus, to going to the UK and going to like delinquent raised schools, it's crazy. But you have to go through that in order to put yourself in an uncomfortable position to see who you really are. But it's funny that you mentioned about the drugs and stuff, because when I was in Manchester school, at the age of 16, you know, in Cyprus, you talk about drugs, they're like, do drugs, you die. Like, your head's exploding and stuff like that. Whereas when I went to the UK, they were like, all right, this is brown. You know, if you don't share needles, you have to do this. This is crack cocaine if you do that. And I'm just sitting there like taking notes, thinking like, what in the world is going on? But they give you so much information because they know it's out there and you're going to do it. So they'd rather you do it safely. We didn't have that understanding coming from the UK to Cyprus because it's something that's so taboo. But like you said, in Cyprus, things do work differently. So the education works differently along where you are. So because over there, they know it's exposed to it. So they're going to teach it in that kind of way. Right here, we're not that exposed to it. So they're going to just tell you, do it and you're dead.
I mean, it's weird. We're getting better at that. I think we're getting better at that.
And it depends on the teacher itself. We had one teacher, Sergio, in school. Shout out Sergio. He was a history teacher, legend. And he was just this short geezer who was just full of life and love and passion about his job. And because everyone, like, you know, Mike's nodding because he was his teacher as well. And I'll never forget him. Yep. I've forgotten like 90% of my teachers' names, but I remember this geezer because every single person in the class pretty much got an A, except one person who got a B. And for him to get a B, that's like him getting 5 A stars. Shout out, you know you are.
And he's one of the few teachers that you bump into now and you're happy to see him.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you're genuinely happy to say hello.
What did he teach?
History.
What made him special?
The way he was teaching, like the way he would bring the class to life, the way he would actually get our imaginations to work. He really used positive and negative reinforcement in the best possible way. And he promised us, like, if everyone got an A, then he would organize us to go to Germany and go to the concentration camps and go see the Bavarian motorworks and just be part of what we were living. So by us studying it and living it, he got us, the reward was to see it in real life. So how our imaginations played on reality. He was just always thinking of new ways. Playing guitar. That was kind of good.
He was a spring.
I think the most important thing with Sergio was that he talked to you, not down to you.
Bravo.
He spoke to you on your level.
Is that because he was short?
No, he treated us as equals.
Yeah, he did.
No, and he took in our opinions as well.
He listened. And there's a difference between listening and just hearing, because the actual skill of listening is difficult. You know, sometimes people just, like you said before, you look at you and they're elsewhere, or they might be looking at you, but they're not really listening to what you're saying.
No.
I think to listen is a skill, because when you're being spoken to, you're supposed to hear what they're saying. You're not supposed to think of a response. So that's the difficult part, is actually taking in the information. He just had the way of doing that by, you know, doing certain games in the classroom, or giving us certain rewards, making it interesting. Just being fun, man. That's what it was. It was just about integrating fun and a bit of humor into the classroom, rather than this is what you have to do this and do that. Whereas I didn't respond to it at all. I mean, I was a very naughty kid. My attention span was like a goldfish, but he kind of made it able for me to pay attention, because it wasn't just a monotone grade chalkboard day and this is what you got to do. Like even maths, I never understood maths. Like, am I going to use Pythagoras theorem when I get older? Like, who's going to, the 90-degree angle on a triangle, who gives a flying fuck? But when I got older and I had a better teacher, I realized that maths is a problem-solving skill. It's a training for your brain. It's about solving future problems that you're going to face that doesn't have to be doing with numbers. So if someone kind of explained it like that to us when we were in children and we were in school, I think it would have made a huge impact, because you find these things out when you get older and when you've already passed that. And if I had that information before and someone was able to explain it to me, like Costa said, talking to me on my level, and like Michael said, understanding that person, it would have made a huge impact, because I know maths is a beautiful thing. It's a problem-solving skills. It's exercise for your brain. You go to the gym and you do curls for your arms. You do maths because it's brain training. So to get that information across, how do you think, as a principal of today, the difference is in between the youth of today and the youth when you were a child?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah.
So that was a long question and I lost the thread.
It was a long question. So my main question is, what major differences do you see between the youth of today and the youth when you were a child at school?
I mean, I was a child at school a long time ago, but I think...
Not that long.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I need to think about this because it's a big question.
It is.
I think, I mean, technology. You can't talk about young people today without talking about technology. I think education when I was younger was more knowledge-based, because you had to have knowledge. Like if you think about when we were young, probably me more than you, but you had a question, and what would you do? You ask your bapu, you look in the encyclopedia, or you just never find out the answer.
Or you get frustrated with your parents at home trying to work out an equation.
But even something like, what's the capital of wherever, or like, really random, just fact-based questions, you'd look it up, or you'd ask someone, or you just never know. Whereas now, actually, it's not about having all that knowledge. I mean, that knowledge is still of value, but you can Google stuff. I mean, AI will do so much for you. So I think now for young people, it's more about them knowing how to use the technology. Like somebody said to me recently, what do you think about AI in schools? Do you think they should ban it? And I was like, no, why would we ban it? Like, I'm not saying that we're just going to say to them, right, go home and write an essay on AI. But we can't just ignore that this is happening, because actually the world that they are going to be living in and working in is going to be using AI in ways we can't even imagine. So what I want them to do is to understand how to work with AI. I mean, AI is really useful, but we know that if we get AI to write something, so you could have said, right, type in ChatGPT, we're interviewing the principal of the American Academy Larnaca, create some questions. And it would draw from principal interviews, and it would draw from probably my school's website and blah, 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 and bring something together. But then you, as an intelligent, human being, will then look at that and say, that's not appropriate. ChatGPT doesn't know this personal bit of information about Georgina. So you have to apply that. So for our young people, what we need them to do is to be able to work with technology, not rely on it totally, but not fear what it's going to do and what it's going to bring. And I think for our generation, it was more like, let's learn facts, let's learn how to do something manually, rather than let's use technology. I mean, I remember like them wheeling a computer into my classroom, and like we'd take it in turns, like 5 minutes, just kind of typing, and it was so different. But then the downside of that, which young people have to really contend with now, is everything else that technology and the internet brings. So we learn things from our friends or from rumors. You know, I remember like someone would hear something from their it's always the older brother, that they'd come in and be like, did you know, blah, blah, blah. And you'd be like, oh my God, is that real? Is that true? Like, do adults really do that? Whereas now, everything...
But wouldn't that make your imagination work more? Because then you'd have to, you know, envision it and how you would, rather than just getting the answer straight away. There's a time lapse of using your brain. Rather than just like, you're the first person that's actually made me okay with AI. The way you've explained it is beautiful, to be honest.
Oh, thank you.
And I now see why you're good at what you do, because you put things into perspective for people to understand exactly what you're talking about. For me personally, I never thought of it like that, but it's true. We're heading into an AI era, which the best thing for you to do as teaching is to teach them how to live with what's coming in the future. And I think that's what they never did for us. I don't think that we were prepared enough to go into adulthood or
The social media era as well.
social media. No one
Because that came up when we were at
yeah,
school.
you can't prepare anything for that because no one knew what that would bring. But I feel like that's personally. I mean, again, like looking back now, I would like there to be classes about dealing with stress. I'd like there to be classes about how
to do your taxes.
how to do taxes.
We do both.
What's a mortgage? These are the kind of things that I think we're not really being prepared for enough. Whereas just like you said, it's accounting, being a doctor or doing maths and science. What's up? I'm joking, that's our 3-minute mark. So in that aspect, I think it's really important to bring these classes forward, and then we'll have a little bit of a halftime break soon and touch on that subject afterwards, because it's going to be an important one, I believe. But there's certain classes that me, you know, soon to be a parent, for example, would want to know where my child is being, where my child's heading, where our future's heading. And if I don't know, it worries me a lot, you know, that those aren't, how can I explain it? I just feel like things that should be offered are not.
How do you know they're not there?
When I was at school.
Okay.
That's
because
why.
They are.
Okay,
they
cool.
Are.
That's why you're here, so we can
Yeah.
find out.
I think they probably were when we were young, but not to the same level, and maybe not in
Definitely
Cyprus,
not.
in the UK.
I'm telling you, it wasn't.
Like, for example, I think you mentioned it last season as well. The counsellor that we had at school. I mean, nowadays, do you have someone that's actually specialised in counselling teenagers, or is it just some random teacher that has a bit of know-how?
When you say counselling, do you mean like universities, or do you mean like
a psychologist?
Psychologist.
So we have an educational psychologist, full time, that works with students and sometimes their families, and that's quite standard, I think now. We have
like the last 10 years, because we left school about 10 years ago.
Yeah. And then we have personal, social, health, and economic education, and I think that covers a lot of what you were talking about. So, you know, managing mental health, stress, relationships as well, things like consent, respect, positive communication, and then cultural things. I mean, Cyprus is so multicultural now compared to the Cyprus that you guys grew up in. Yeah. And you were in an international school, you were in a private school, you were in a bubble, actually. But even then it wasn't that international. It was predominantly like
Cypriot with a few foreigners. Yeah.
We had one Chinese kid, one Russian kid,
and one Indian.
Yeah.
One Indian kid. That was it.
And then there's something.
And they were fascinating because you don't really see them every day. You know what I mean?
And then there's also something called financial literacy now, which the University of Cyprus are they've created a curriculum, and it's being delivered in a lot of schools across Cyprus, including ours. We are a very financially illiterate country, actually, statistically. I'm not sure why. I think probably because we're not that financially independent. We have such supportive families, but we tend to live with our parents longer than, you know, people in other European countries. We tend to get more financial support from our families than, you know, like in the UK, people will move out at 16. I had students that were financially independent and didn't live at home, and they were 17, they were doing their A-levels.
And
you know, in Cyprus, you know, you move out at 30 and your mum will be turning up with, you know, magaroni do forno in Tupperware to make sure you're not starving.
Shout out every mum that brings their sons and daughters magaroni do forno.
So it's which is good. But the downside is you go to the UK and you don't know how to open a bank account, and you don't understand that a credit card needs to be paid back, and they will want 25.7% interest. So I can see some waving.
Yeah, whenever
Or
our
pause.
cast crew members do some crazy sign language, it means it's our break. That, and we'll have a little halftime break for you
Okay.
guys, and see you soon.
Let's-
Take.
Action.
Hello. Welcome back.
Hello there. We're back. Hope you had a nice little break. Whenever I speak, I don't even know which camera to look at. I'm just going to look at both and try and get some edits.
Oh, that one.
Ooh.
That's not where I've been looking.
What, the go?
No, you're supposed to look at the camera. Hi. Hope you had a good halftime break. We've had an amazing time so far. We're going to touch up a little bit more about mental health right now. And so Michael starts off.
Before we got into the mental health, I've got a fun fact.
Oh.
So I heard that you taught Central C and Digger D when you were teaching in England.
I did.
And my question on that is, what's it like knowing that you taught a very famous rapper, that's probably a multimillionaire dollar, and in their lyrics they may say stuff like, fuck the teachers that didn't believe in me, blah, blah, blah. What was the experience teaching someone that did become a rapper eventually?
And why did you not believe in him? I'm joking.
Or did you see that, I mean, you may have taught people that became footballers, athletes, artists.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see that from a young age? Is it something that we can, in our educational system, do we help that and do we let these people grow, or do we keep them on the path of go on the educational route? Which what we had, I think, in our time. It was more, stick to the books, leave the football for the break time.
And we will tag Central C in this, so we hope he sees it.
That was like 4 questions. So firstly, yes, I taught Central C, Oakley, GCSE. He was nice. He was a really nice kid. I mean, he's not a kid now, he's an adult. And my partner in particular listens to his music quite a lot. And the first time he did, I was like, I used to teach Oakley, I used to teach him. He wasn't the strongest mathematician, but he was a nice student. Really, really nice kid, actually, really nice. He wasn't that big in music, as in it's not like he did music GCSE and he did music A-level. I mean, he left after his GCSEs. So in answer to that part of your question, perhaps our school environment didn't nurture his kind of musical talents. Music GCSE, I think, is a bit more traditional, I guess, a bit more academic. And I think
Still
a
play
lot
the
of
recorder?
schools-
That's what we did in music. Oh, no.
But I hadn't.
I used to hate that.
I used to sit at the back, move my fingers, and just not blow
Oh, wow.
because I just didn't know what I was doing. But the school that I worked in London was very, very mixed intake, really mixed intake. So we had, kids that would go to Oxford and Cambridge, kids that would go into medicine and engineering, kids that were kicked out, kids who got into a lot of trouble with the police, sometimes unfortunately went to prison. We had a real spectrum, but it was quite an inclusive curriculum. So if you were very academic, there was definitely something for you. If you were less academic, we did have students who played football and one went to Chelsea, one went to Manchester, I think. Was it Man U? Tottenham? I can't remember. And we supported that. I mean, they'd go off on their training and we'd have to kind of juggle their learning because they were the entire spectrum of young people. I mean, we had everyone. In terms of the actual curriculum nurturing that, I think it's really difficult to, because for every student like Oakley, I'm very happy for the success that he's had and he deserves it. I think if you actually look at his career, he's really smart in terms of his marketing and the way that he's kind of developed himself and the affiliations that he's done, things like that. But for every person like him, there will be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands maybe, who won't make it. And I would say, as a teacher, have something to fall back on.
A plan B.
What you were saying earlier about maths and saying to your teachers, why do we need this? Why do we need this? Well, you're not going to use it directly in what you do. But I think having qualifications, no one can ever take them away from you. I think it can give you a sense of confidence and independence when you go out into the world. Say, I've got these things to fall back on. I've got these things that show what I'm capable of. And hopefully there will be skills that are transferable. Like, you know, if you're a runner, if you jog, you're probably never going to have to use that skill, hopefully, unless you're running from someone. But it's what that training gives you in terms of your mental discipline and your physicality, you will then use and apply in many other situations. Mm-hmm. With Digger D, he left our school quite early on for behavioural reasons, so I never taught him. I had a few interactions with him in the corridors. He's also he's got a good career. I think he's quite a different character. In the press, certainly in the UK press, they're often grouped together because they went to the same school, but they were very different people, and I think musically they're quite different artists as well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Nice. Does that answer your question?
That does, yeah.
You had quite a few questions. I tried to remember them all.
So, back on mental health. George, can you bring the mic closer to you, actually?
I was going to say.
Like that?
Yeah, that's better. No.
It's really weird. Like, you have to, like, proper, like, face it. Because if I'm talking here and I'm talking here, you get, like, the really big...
It's really difficult to... This is obviously something I'm not used to ignore it in your peripheral vision. I think that's what I'm finding. So
yeah, it's true. It's like your nose. You can actually see your nose, but your brain just
Ignores
chooses to ignore it.
At CYPRUS, we can definitely see our nose.
Speak for yourself, man. I've got gorgeous nose. Mental health. Cool. I think this is a subject that we always like to touch on this podcast because it really is important. And I also believe that the world that we are living in right now has changed, continues to change. As you mentioned before about social media and technology coming into place, we are prolonged for longer periods of time to stimulus coming from social media, which does have an effect on us. I mean, even subconsciously, if you're constantly listening to certain things or seeing certain things, I think personally it does affect me as well when it's constantly around you. So what is the part that you're playing as a principal in regarding that this mental health status is as comfortable as it could be?
I'm not going to take credit for everything we do in our school. We've got a really good head of pastoral. We have a head of year for every year group whose main responsibility is supporting the progress and the development and well-being of our students. And then obviously we've got our teachers and our educational psychologists who are always have this in mind. In terms of what we're doing, I think there has to be a level of education about mental health. So we have the PSHE program where we try to educate them about their own feelings and the different stages of their life that they're going through. But then as well as just educating them, you feel this way because, and this is how you can deal with it, this is how you can communicate your way through it. There has to be that support system as well to kind of identify things quite early on, make sure that there's appropriate safeguarding in place, and then getting the parents involved, because a lot of it is about what happens at home.
For sure.
I think teachers and schools have a massive responsibility, but I don't think it's just teachers and schools that hold that responsibility. And back in the day, we were given mobile phones. We all got our phones probably in our teens when they first came out, and no one really thought anything of it. Your parents would have been like, "Oh, it's so I can get hold of you," and that was it. And now schools in the UK have banned phones.
Really?
I mean, it's a whole countrywide thing, which is positive. I think you'll see a lot of these very senior people, in Microsoft or in Google or in social media networks, and they say, I don't let my children have phones, or my kids aren't allowed on social media until they're 15, because there are very clever people behind the scenes who are basically working to create addiction because it brings money in. And like many things that created addiction, like smoking, at the time it was just big corporations wanting to make money. And then it was only afterwards where people were like, oh, wait a minute, what are we actually doing to people here? What are the after effects? So with social media, again, it's about creating awareness and educating young people. I mean, when we were young, we'd see things on the TV or MTV or whatever. I remember I wanted to look like Kylie Minogue, right? Which was never going to happen. But that was like, I remember being, young and in those really formative years where you really care about your appearance, wanting to look like her and not looking like her, or trying to borrow my mum's makeup and put a bit of lipstick on. But now it's not just, Kylie Minogue that looks a certain way. As far as young people are concerned, it's everyone on social media, even real people, some blogger or Instagrammer from, I don't know, Bafor, who's got a few thousand followers, whoever it is, they probably look very little like they do online. And it's creating awareness about what's actually going on, and that your confidence and your self-worth doesn't come from how many likes you get or how other people see you, but how you feel. I mean, I see it now with, the false eyelashes or nails and all these things, but they have a level of exposure that we never had. And it's about us educating them. I mean, Dove, the kind of moisturizers and soaps and whatever, they did a really, really good campaign where they showed this very beautiful woman, and then they kind of unpicked what the kind of filtering and all the different modifications that had been done, and then what that person actually looked like. And most people that you will follow online, even if they're not that big, we're not talking about J-Lo, we're just talking about someone with a few thousand followers, won't look like that in real life. And it's something that young people are aspiring to, because that's what they see and that's what they're exposed to. So it's about us educating parents, educating young people, and trying to protect them as much as we possibly can from that world. I mean, there's a place for social media, certainly. Your podcast wouldn't exist without, YouTube and Instagram and things, but it's where does it fit and how do we protect young people from it?
Yeah, it's also, of course, what you're using social media for. I've always said this, like, in podcasts before, it does have a time and a place, and I think it can be as good as it can be bad, and vice versa. Is it vice versa or vice versa?
Vice.
Okay, cool. Or vice versa. But for me personally, the reason I'm asking about these questions is because it does create a fake bubble that kind of protects the person that's using it. But nowadays, a lot more people have access to be able to look like that. There's a lot more Botox, there's more of this, there's more of that.
So it's normalized as well.
It is normalized. As before, you see someone that don't like their lips, and they wouldn't want to say, oh no, it's natural, or nothing's been touched. But now it's like, oh yeah, of course I do my lips. Of course I do put filler. Of course I got my wrinkles done. And do you think that's a good thing? That they normalize it?
Is it more accepted?
Not necessarily, no. I think... Explain your question again. What do you mean that they normalize it?
So right now, if I'm a young male or female and I'm have access to social media and Instagram, and I see these things, and I see I don't look like that. I haven't got a six pack, or I don't have nice big lips, and that's what society tells us right now is nice. Before, in the olden times, if you were a very big, voluptuous, fat lady, you were seen as posh and as a sign of power and well-fed and welfare. So then you'd have to look like that. Whereas as time changes now, you've got to look in a certain way. So there is a lot more accessibility to be able to look like that.
Look like the current trends.
Yeah, like the current trends. But isn't that creating, I don't know, it's weird.
I think there's nothing wrong with looking after yourself. I mean, I don't condemn anyone that gets surgery or Botox or, but I think it's different when people are young because they haven't fully grown, they haven't fully developed. I think when you're older and you've kind of come to accept the way that you look, if you want to colour your hair or get piercings or tattoos or, but I think when you're very young, in my view, you need to kind of wait a little bit. And those things are happening younger and younger, and it's really difficult for parents sometimes to say, no, you need to wait. But I think other than just, we're talking very much about image and how that affects young people with social media, but the other thing is how accessible they are now to the outside world. So not just advertising, but, predators online. I mean, predators is, you kind of, I don't like the word, but essentially most people on social media under a certain age, anyone can message them and pretend to be anyone. And the statistics out there are absolutely terrifying. So again, educating your children about firstly, having some control over their social media. I'd say if you're a parent, you should be checking it. You should have access. There's nothing that they should be hiding from you. They should know not to post certain things. They should know that in 10 years' time, when they apply for a job, someone's going to look them up and look at their old photos and look at things that they posted. You know, you get people losing their jobs because of something racist or homophobic that they posted 10 years ago. You get people who...
I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
you
10
can't
years
look
ago.
at someone's
You're a different person back then, right?
Yes.
tweet
but
from 2012 and
whereas we
judge
might
someone
have
that.
made certain mistakes when we were young, now everything is online. You know, you get drunk, someone's going to take a picture of it. You say something inappropriate, you're going to post it without thinking. I think young people have to be very, very mindful. And when you're young, you think the future is so far ahead. You think being an adult, being old is so far ahead, and you'll never have to deal with those consequences. But just educating young people, you don't send pictures to people, you don't take inappropriate pictures, you don't, you know, you make everything very private. Because, and even as a parent, I'm very careful about what I post of my children and who gets to see that, because they don't have any say in it. It's their images, and I'm the one that, you know, owns them. But you don't know who's out there, and they've done so many kind of studies and so many experiments where they all create a profile with, you know, a young girl who's like 13, 14, and within hours they will be getting messages, inappropriate messages and misleading messages, encouraging messages. And as a parent, it's so difficult to protect your children from that. And I think you need to be really vigilant. Like, it's terrifying, but I think the like ramifications, if you are not careful, I think are so much worse.
So the reason I mentioned about the imagery is because the question I wanted to ask you about imagery, and I'm saving it till now so I can hear your opinion about it, is because imagine a teacher, not necessarily in your school, any school, is a teacher and comes to work and has these kinds of things on them, which is like they say their social media is open and their students can see them, or they also have changed their appearance and come to school like that. As a child, you see most teachers as an idol, and you look up to them, and what they do is what you believe is right because they're the ones that are teaching you. So if I've got a teacher or a guy who comes in and has got rid of his wrinkles and this and that, then I'm looking at that and I'm thinking it's acceptable. Also the way they dress and so forth. So do you guys have like a certain way that you're supposed to look as a teacher? Do you have like we have school uniform? Do you like, hey, don't get Botox, or
like a dress code?
Don't come with a mini skirt. Don't come with blue streaks in your hair.
I mean,
I'm not going to lie. When we were at school, there wasn't limits with some of our teachers. If you think about it,
what they used to wear?
Some of our female teachers did not dress like what you would see as a sensible teacher. No. Obviously, things have changed, and that looking back, Dora, as a teenage boy when you're 14, 15, it wasn't positive for us. It wasn't good for us, and it wasn't good for the girls either, because they, as you said, they idolize it.
It was alright at times.
It was good at the time.
I mean, we have a staff dress code,
Okay.
of course. Staff need to dress professionally. Our female staff are very careful and very ladylike and elegant, I think, in the way that we dress. So I don't think we have the issues that you mentioned, although I have heard about it. In UK schools, I think teachers have a slightly different dress code. I mean, the men wear suits. In Cyprus, it's not as practical to wear suits, and I think people dress a bit more casually. But no, we don't have those issues. And then I'm not going to tell my staff not to get Botox or not to dye their hair. No one has blue hair.
What about green hair?
But then also there has to be an understanding that teachers are adults, actually. So we used to get this a lot in the UK. I mean, I've got 2 earrings in each ear.
How dare you?
And in
You
my
rebel.
school in London, it was 1 earring per ear for boys and for girls. And that's another thing. I mean, dress codes for boys have changed quite a lot as well, because you no longer have girls wear this and boys wear that. I think we need to be a bit more open. But we had boys or girls can have 1 earring in each ear, and then the students would say to me, but you've got 2. You're allowed 2. Yeah, but I'm an adult. I'm a teacher. I work here. This is my place of work. So
That's your job, to make them understand that there's a complete difference between
also
their role
I can
and your
drive
role.
to work, but at the moment you can't, because you're not old enough to drive. I pay taxes. I work here. I'm paid to be here. So I need to be professional and I need to uphold certain standards. So no, I'm not going to turn up with blue hair, but at the same time, there has to be an understanding that the teachers are adults and the students, okay, our year sevens, you know, many of them are adults, but there has to be a difference. So you've got to model that good behaviour, but we don't dress the same as them. And I'm not going to dictate to my staff, as long as they're dressed professionally. I mean, if, you know, they get Botox or they're wearing makeup or whatever, it's up to them. They're adults.
So you use the word adult quite often. And one thing that I've noticed that you just called your year sevens adults.
Yeah, they are.
So in your eyes, what makes you an adult? At what age? Is it your experience? Is it your maturity? Is it that you're in year 7 now?
Very much in legal terms.
Okay.
So our year sevens are legally adults.
Okay.
I mean, they're 18. They live with their parents. They are still in school, but they're adults. But the majority of my students, I would consider them and I would refer to them as young adults because they are. I think, depending on the child and the environment, but they do kind of cross over a threshold around 12, 13, 14, where you start to communicate with them differently. They start to behave differently, and you need to, you know, treat them accordingly. It's not like you're 17 and 11 and a half months and you're a child, you're playing with toys and you need to be told what to do, and then suddenly you're 18 and you know everything. I think it needs to be a really gradual and fluid process, and it's our role to treat them as young adults so that they understand that they're part of the adult world. I think we're very good at that, actually, in CYPRUS. I think young people are much more integrated into the adult environment. I think in the UK, there's a real divide between children and adults, and certainly teenagers, and then the rest of society. For example, if in London, if your child's turning 13 and you want to host a birthday party, there'll be so many venues that won't have a 13-year-old's birthday party. They'll have a 12-year-old, but once you get to 13, they're like, we don't want any of that. They'll be drinking, they'll be smoking, they'll be fighting, they'll be doing God knows what in the toilets, and they have a real fear and suspicion of what teenagers are up to. Instead of saying, no, they're almost adults, let's gather them into our adult community and support them and guide them and accept them for the young people that they're, you know, the future adults. There's this real kind of like, they're teenagers, they're just gonna, you know, be antisocial and do things that we don't approve of, and there's a real divide, and we don't have that in CYPRUS as much, which I think is really good.
It's definitely good because, like, from a younger age, you're more involved with, like, you're like you said before, like maybe your grandparents are going to raise you, and you have an older person to look up to, respect. When you go out for dinner, you kind of sit together. There's no like child's table, then the adults table. Everyone kind of sits together. You hear a bit more of an adult conversation. And of course, like if you have older siblings, you have someone to like look forward to. Like me personally, my brother's like 5 years older than me. So whenever I always wanted to be like my brother and be with the older crowd, and that's what they do. So I want to do that so I can be accepted and be a bit more mature, which kind of grows into the person you are today. So growing into the person you are today, and as you mentioned before, that now things are changing between guys' dress code and women's dress code and earrings and so forth. But nowadays there is, I think, a lot more confusion when it comes to your gender roles. And this is a subject I would want to touch on if you don't mind. So with gender roles in schools, coming from a personal standpoint, I think it's important to teach your role as what you are, because there is a lot of confusion happening during these periods of age. And, you know, if you're a man, you're supposed to like women and defend yourself as a role in society, for example. Now, I've heard that women and girls in school are now allowed to wear trousers.
For a long time.
For a long time.
But when I was in school.
I didn't know that. We weren't allowed.
Okay.
So when we were in school, like that, girls wear skirts and then boys wear trousers. So are boys allowed to wear skirts?
I mean, technically.
Technically.
Technically, under, you know, EU law, I don't think you can discriminate if somebody wants to wear a skirt. It hasn't happened. I think with girls wearing trousers, there's a practical reason, because girls have a lot more freedom physically when they are wearing trousers. So, I mean, even, you know, my daughter, she's almost 4. She goes to my school in the nursery, she loves wearing dresses. She absolutely adores dresses, and she likes to prance around the house in her dresses. And at school, she's got the choice of a trousers or a dress. So she wears a school dress, but I put little leggings underneath because it's about her comfort. If she's going down the slide or if she's sitting with her legs crossed or whatever, I want her to feel comfortable and secure and not feel like she has to cover
Hide
herself
or
or
be
be
vulnerable.
mindful. So I think a lot of girls wear trousers because they're just more practical. They're warmer. And I think you've got a lot more physical freedom. I don't think it's necessarily a gender thing.
Okay.
I mean, women have been wearing trousers. My AI, even in the last sort of 10 years of her life, started to wear trousers. But before that, you know, she used to wear dresses, and it was very much women wear dresses and men wear trousers. But I think it's a bit more fluid than that. I think in Cyprus, we are very far from boys wanting to wear dresses to school. I don't necessarily think it's a sexuality thing. Sometimes it can just be an expression thing. I mean, I don't know if you recently saw the Beckham
He wore a
documentary.
sarong, didn't he?
But yeah, that was a really big thing. And that was, 15, 20 years ago? And that was controversial at the time, and he did it to be controversial. It hasn't happened where a student has come in and said, I would like to wear a dress. But I think we have to be very mindful of the law as well in terms of, equality.
I mean, coming from a different generation, how do you guys deal with gender neutrality, or kids nowadays, expressing themselves in different ways than what we had 10, 15 years ago? How do you deal with that as a school, and also on a personal level? What are your thoughts on?
So do you have, if I come to you and I say to you, Miss Georgina, I identify now as a female, and I want you to, respond to me as she, they, them, for example.
Is there like a procedure?
Do you have
you
to
take?
Or do you think it's your role to say, why do you do this, and go in a deeper role rather than just accepting it?
It's not necessarily my role as the principal. If you were one of my students and you came in and you expressed that, we would have to include your parents in the conversation, and you would work with our educational psychologist. And then schools at the moment, at least in Cyprus, they're not really teaching this stuff. I mean, there's been a lot of controversy in, the UK and the US, for example, where schools are teaching, there's this gender and there's this gender and you can be this and you can be that. And there's been uproar from parents because the parents aren't being educated and they're not being informed at times about what their children are going to be learning. And then the kids come home confused, and then the parents are just alarmed by it. So in schools, and certainly in our school, we're not, necessarily teaching that in a, right, these are your options, guys, let's go away and choose. It doesn't work that way. What we are as a school is inclusive and supportive of each of our students and whatever their kind of journey is. So if a student wants to come in and say, or to express a desire to be referred to as a different gender or whatever, there will be a much bigger conversation. I mean, you don't just wake up one day and say, right, this is my gender. It's a much bigger conversation that has to involve your family, that has to involve external services, and then we put whatever support is necessary in place.
Mm-hmm.
You put the support in place on what you believe is the best for the child itself,
Yes,
not your personal beliefs.
of course.
Okay. The
I
reason
think
I'm mentioning about
always-
the skirt and this and that is not because I'm, I don't care if you wear a skirt or not. It's just I'm taking it from the very first thing, which is uniform based. And then after the uniform, then you go into the pronoun phase. And then from pronoun phase, you go to what you identify as. That's why I started in that order. I've got nothing against women wearing skirts, for God's sake. The reason I went there is because that's the basic format of what distinguishes between a man and a woman in school from back in the day, very old school ways. And then leading to something that we are now. It personally frightens me, to be honest. I believe that if you were given so much choice, then there's more confusion. And I don't understand where this is coming from. Who is allowing the head of education to be able to teach these things? For so many years, there was a man and a woman. So now why
think
you...
it's-
Like our ministry as well, or the ministries in general, globally, of education. Do you think they're taking the right steps?
Why are they placing this right now?
I don't think, if it's being done properly, I don't think it should be presented as a choice. It's not like, right, guys, here's your options. go away, do some reading and pick. It's more that schools should be teaching inclusivity. So if, 30, 40, 50 years ago, someone who was homosexual, if they were, gay and starting to feel attracted to people of their own gender, would have very much kept it to themselves, or started wondering, is there something wrong with me, or how are my parents going to feel, or, and it's
must be a horrible journey to feel so scared and inside.
It's not that we're presenting those options. Schools shouldn't be presenting these as different pathways that you can take. It's more about inclusivity and acceptance, that if you feel this way, there's someone for you to talk to, and it's okay, and that's it. And we don't judge people, and we don't, kind of ostracize people, and we don't say things about them or to them. So it's just educating us around that. Any school that is presenting it as just a choice without any other education or information is not doing the right thing, because you might have one child in 100, if that is making that choice. You don't present it to everyone so that they can all sit there and pick, but you educate the other 99 that some people might make these life decisions, or it might not even be a choice. It's just how they feel and who they are. That's their identity, that you accept them. And yes, we're in CYPRUS and we have very close-knit communities, and everyone knows everybody, but most of our students will be living abroad, working abroad in very different environments with very different kind of societal norms, and they need to understand how things are in other parts of the world in order to be able to integrate, in order to be able to work with different types
to not get
of
the
people.
culture shock when they go to university, when they work in different countries.
Definitely.
No.
So how,
I mean, I was saying just in the break, my old school in the UK, I follow them on social media, and one of their teachers recently got married over half term, a female member of staff, and she married a woman. And they put it on their social media, like, congratulations to so-and-so who married, her new wife. We're very far from that, I think, as a society in CYPRUS, and that's okay. We're moving at a different pace, and maybe we'll never be at that point. But different countries and different places are doing very, very different things. As educators, it's our job to educate and inform and support. And our personal views about anything, politics, religion, gender, whatever it is, should remain very much personal, I think, and not really come into the classroom. Because otherwise our students will be pulled in very different ways, depending on what that one person's view is. And sometimes you'll find that teachers' views, not necessarily in our school, but in some schools, might be very different from students, because they're 1, 2, 3 generations younger than us.
Yeah,
so they're
for sure.
exposed to different things. Our school is very inclusive. Our students are very broad-minded and very well educated on all these different things. We don't, present gender as an option. It's not really part of the current curriculum, but we do very much advocate for, inclusivity, acceptance.
this is the problem. Like, we're hearing rumours now that in schools in Cyprus they're going to be teaching that there's more than 2 genders.
I think that's a real oversimplification of it, and I think that parents are probably afraid about what is happening.
For sure.
But I don't think any school is saying, right, there's this many genders and these are your options. It's more, this exists, and that's it, I think.
So it's about understanding what is actually happening in other places, not just where you're from.
Yeah.
Which, again, I find it really strange how in these bigger communities and bigger countries and states that these things are going on there, but they're not going on here. Like,
'Cause we're still a very much Christian country, isn't it? Which plays a big role. Our religion plays a big role in how we run the country. So I think that's why we're moving a lot slower than other nations, especially in Europe.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think that we have always
We keep our traditions.
progressed a little bit slower than maybe places like the UK or the US. What I would say about the new generation, the younger generation, like my students' age, is they make me very excited. I mean, young people are the future. I know it's really cliche, but there's a lot that needs to be changed in in Cyprus, I think. And we're becoming more multicultural. We've got people like Anita Dimitriou in Parliament. We've got so much progress happening. And when I see my students and how broad-minded they are, how vocal they are, how mature and how involved in making change, whether it's about the environment or whether it's about other things, it makes me feel really, really excited, really positive for, the future of our country.
That's good to hear, especially coming from your standpoint, because as parents, as young adults, as adults in the industry, we are always worried and always moan about this youth of today and things like that. But I don't think we have anything to worry about in that sense, because I remember hearing that from my parents. I'm sure they heard that from their parents, and yet we're still doing it. It's just certain things that, like you said, parents are not educated on, which if you don't know, then that causes fear. Understanding causes acceptance. So that's my way of kind of dealing with it. Because, I got a lot of younger children, kids that go to the same school that I did. And I'm looking at when I was 16 and what they're telling me. And I find that it's pretty much the same thing, but they're just using technology and, like you said before, in their advantage. Mm-hmm. Some of them are a lot more exposed to business minded and now trading and Bitcoins and how to make money at a younger age and going Gagobedria to take £30 from everyone. Because with that money, when I turn 18, I can buy a car. I think because they're a lot more exposed to what's going on, they're actually becoming a bit smarter by using this technology. But then again, I also have the other side where they're telling me things that they're being sent, guys and girls, that are exposed to a lot more explicit content and things that we would never even dream about doing back then. Especially they were never really that open as well. But again, this is just how the ball is rolling. I've got a very close friend of mine. He's a psychologist. His name is a neuroscientist as well. His name's Dr. Stefanos.
You had him on a previous episode.
We did.
I'd like to get him into school at some point, actually.
Amazing. He is actually looking for loads of different things to do. I think he's got some things coming up now with the football team and also with stuff like that, like sports psychology, which I think everyone needs. So yeah, I'd love to get in touch with him. He'll be over the moon. He likes being in the limelight. Love it. So just a couple of questions. I know they could be open in the short questions, but if you could just throw some bullet points at us.
I'll try.
So the first one that Dr. Steph has asked me to ask you is financial management. How do they tackle this problem?
In terms of educating young people?
Yeah.
Financial literacy that I mentioned before, I think is the main thing. So it's part of our PSHE curriculum, personal social health and
I was going to ask you what that stands for.
And then also there is a course that's just being rolled out to the private schools first, and then they're trying to get the public schools on board. And it's educating young people who, normally they go to university with very little money management skills on things like pensions, interest rates, getting a credit card, but also the kind of things that they'll need when they first go to university, paying bills and opening up a bank account and what a checkbook is.
We never had none of that.
Yeah.
Nope.
So that's really good to hear.
Vital.
He says all children are born geniuses. Being a genius is being imaginative and creative. How exactly does the educational system promote this? I don't agree with that.
You don't agree?
No. I don't agree that everyone's born a genius. I do believe that there are geniuses out there who just have a certain gift that they've been given and are able to use their brain in a certain way that we don't, and have access to certain things that we don't, or see things. Otherwise there'll be a lot of Einsteins and a lot of Bill Gates and stuff like that.
But I think everyone's born with a certain strength.
Oh, for sure.
That's
your individual strength. Your individual strength could be an amazing athlete. Your individual strength could be a genius. So in his ways is how does the educational system promote this? Everyone's a genius.
I think it depends on how you define a genius. I mean, not everyone is going to be an Einstein, but he was a genius in terms of science.
Exactly.
And you might get a genius who is, a footballer or something. But
That's
I think
cool. I never thought of it that way.
You have to go in. Maybe not everyone is a genius. I mean, that's a lot of genii in the world.
That's Aladdin.
But you go in as a teacher, as an educator, with the attitude that everyone is a genius. You treat everyone like with your children.
I love that. That's good to hear.
Maybe your kids are smart, maybe they're not, but you treat them like they are the smartest, most wonderful young people in the world. And hopefully they will embody that, and the confidence that they have in that will help them to find their gift or their talent and, you know, nurture it and
because I do know in the
genius.
UK that they do put them in certain classes depending on their educational level.
setting.
Yeah. So like this
You
could be
agree
like
with that?
set A and set B. So if you're giving a lot more attention to certain children and helping them move forward faster, then all you're doing is slowing down the other set of children.
You're grouping people,
Yes.
which can
I mean,
be.
it has its advantages and disadvantages. I mean, my master's, this isn't a short answer, but my master's thesis was on setting, because it's the most popular subject to do it in is in maths. And at my previous school, we had single sex setting, which worked really well for the girls because they weren't in this mindset of boys are good at maths and I'll just sit back. And we had ability setting, which can sometimes help the lower ability students because they're in a smaller group. But it can also be really, it can be quite bleak. I think if you're in set 7 or set 8, it can be quite discouraging. Or the bottom set. I mean, that's a phrase I hate. The bottom set. It just sounds horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, lower ability. It doesn't sound much
If
better.
someone tells you every single day that you're not good at something, you're not going to be good at it.
And
I
if
do believe
you're-
that. If
I
you-
mean, we did, when I was head of maths, we tried to, instead of having sets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, we named them. And they had different names. So you didn't necessarily know which set you were in, whether you were in set 3 or
Like
set
the
4.
giraffe set.
But could
We
they
had
be? They
letters
could.
of the Greek alphabet, and we had the names of planets, because it was set with science and maths. But still, they'd look around the room and they'd be like, "Yeah, I'm probably not in the top set." Where we are at the American Academy, we don't set them by ability. It's a lot more aspirational. It does change the way that you teach. You need to have much better differentiation, because you'll have students that are, you know, aiming for a 9, so like an A star, and you'll have students that might be aiming for a pass because it's their weakest subject. And you have to cater to all of them within that lesson. So it can be more difficult as a teacher.
Okay.
But I think you're less likely to leave people behind. Whereas if you put them into fixed sets, you'll review the sets every term, and so, you know, you might move up, but for you to move up, someone needs to move down, and you have to then manage that and how that affects them emotionally and psychologically.
I've always been a believer of if you take someone from the bottom set and put them in a higher set, I'll guarantee they'll do better at maths.
It works.
Of course it does.
I've done it.
Thank you.
We used to take...
So imagine if everyone just
Well,
said,
the
hey,
other thing is, why is someone in the lower set? So you'll find that there's somebody who might have a severe learning difficulty and they need to work at a slower speed. You'll have someone who missed a lot of school for behaviour, but actually they're really smart, and that group isn't right for them because they have a much greater ability than the work that's being taught. They're just naughty and they miss a lot of lessons. And so they will kind of disrupt each other, and then that set becomes slightly unmanageable. And then that's when I used to always end up teaching this kind of naughty boys group. And we would sometimes remove the trickiest student who was smart but had a lot of gaps because they'd missed a lot of school because their behaviour had been really poor, and put them into a higher group. And when they didn't have people to bounce off of, when they did something stupid and they'd look around, and instead of people just being like,
they get no response.
they'd just be like, "You're disrupting my learning." They'd stop doing it,
Yeah, for sure.
because they were in a much more aspirational learning environment.
They used to separate me all the time from like my best mate, and then you just sit in the front of the class, you have to look back and be like, I miss you, bro.
But see, within class, I mean, what you're mentioning, I bet they used to pick you out and put you in between 2 well-behaved girls.
And you,
Quiet
and you still
girls, and
still
you
corrupt
try
them.
and chat.
I used
Still
to sit
corrupt
between
them.
Chryso and also,
Errado.
Erato,
She was,
bravo.
yeah.
They spent between these
So
two.
I think mixed
was terrible.
ability, it can be more difficult to teach, but I think it's better for the students if you've got the right environment.
Okay. How much time do we got? 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Quick-
Any more from Dr. Steph?
Yeah, like self-sustainability. It says to be free is to know how to live off the land of your back. Gardening and things like this. Does the educational system teach basic survival skills? Maybe he was watching Bear Grylls when he wrote this one.
Not so much in the mainstream kind of curriculum, because that's a lot more traditional, you know, English, math, science, etc., music, art. But what we do have, and I think this is something that separates private schools, and particularly our school, from a lot of other schools in Cyprus, is we have a phenomenal extracurricular program. So we've got over 40 clubs. And students can do so many different things depending on what their interests are. So, you know, the average academic private school is not teaching farming, but we do have, for example, you know, fishing club, and we do have an environmental club. So depending on a student's interest, we've got Duke of Edinburgh, where they'll learn survival skills, and they'll you know, learn lots of different things. We've got leadership programs where, again, you know, it's not about being a farmer, but I don't think everyone in the world needs to be a farmer. I think you need, you know, lots of different people. But leadership skills and confidence and being able to speak publicly, we teach those kind of things.
And do you have lessons on ethics instead of religion?
So the CYPRUS curriculum, the Ministry of Education, you have to teach religion, and you have to teach...
Like Jesus and Friends.
You have to teach about the Christian Orthodox faith. We do...
Do you agree with that, coming from a Christian country?
Because
That's a difficult question.
so we never learnt about other religions.
No, we didn't.
It was just about our religion.
We had RE, which stands for religious education, but we just learned about Jesus and Friends, like a South Park episode. It was just about stories.
And take us to church every Easter.
I believe that, you know, we should be teaching about our religion, but we say our religion as Greek Cypriot, you know, Orthodox people. But a lot of young people in Cyprus aren't. I think we should be teaching about other religions, and we do to an extent, because our students sit the RS GCSE a year early, and then in year 5 they learn about philosophy and ethics and what different religions believe about different kind of ethical issues. And then if they choose to do the A-level, then there's, you know, one of the 2 modules is about philosophy and ethics, and the other one is more religion-based. I think we could probably be teaching more. We have to work very much within the constraints of the ministry's guidelines, because our students get the abolidion. I think that sometimes there's a misunderstanding and a fear about what RS is. You're not teaching, again, you're not teaching options. You're not saying, right, guys, there's 6 religions and you're going to pick one. What you're teaching is what other people believe, so that we can be tolerant and so that we can kind of move through the world understanding. I mean, if you think, and right now is a very kind of crucial time to be thinking about these things, the misunderstanding and the hatred that comes from something that is supposedly as pure as religion, and differences in religion, differences in different people's beliefs. If we educate young people that, okay, fine, you're Orthodox, but Muslim people think this, and Jewish people think that, and Hindu people think this, you'll realize that actually we have a lot of similarities across religions, and that understanding another religion doesn't mean you're going to go and convert. It just means that you have a level of education and tolerance, so that when you meet people from different faiths and different backgrounds, you don't fear them and you don't make quick judgments about what they believe. You just, you know, accept each other and work alongside each other.
So nice to hear. Like, I feel so
amazing.
much better hearing this from you, because it was so different from our times at school. And with the way that the world is changing, I feel like education should change in that direction as well. And this personally has made me feel a lot comfortable with this podcast, knowing in that there is changes that are being brought, because what we face now is different from what we faced back then. So we might have thinking back then it wasn't the right thing to do, but obviously that's how it was back then, and that was what they believed. The same with your parents are raising you with the best knowledge they have. They don't do it on purpose to mentally scar you for the rest of your life. This is what needs to be done. I mean, because when I was in RE and I asked a question about another religion, I was told to leave the class, and she started shouting at me and saying, first of all, you need to learn about your religion and forget this other rubbish. And I'm like, wow. And I was the only one that got a B in that class. Everyone got an A because I asked about the lady with the 7 hands.
I think we need to know about our religion, of course. I mean, if you don't know about your religion, then are you really that religious, or are you just following what you're told? But I think it needs to be about the values as well. So we're a Christian school. We're obviously, you know, we have members of the church on our board. We have a close relationship with the local church, but it's also about Christian values. So it's not just, okay, we're Christian Orthodox and, you know, we have the Archbishop's name day as a school holiday. It's, what are our values? Do we teach forgiveness when we have conflict in school or when students misbehave? do we teach charity, and do we embody that in the things that we do? Like, in a few weeks' time, we've got we have Thanksgiving, because we were founded by Americans, and we have our collection, and we do so much for charity. And, do we teach tolerance? Do we treat people kindly and in a Christian way? And that's what it should be about, not just the Bible says this, and here's a story.
Look, I agree with that.
Believe.
I believe where you're from, like, that's what you have to respect. If we're in Cyprus and people come here, they respect this. When we go to other countries, we respect that. And, if you're entering a new country or new realm or new religion, it's down to you as an individual to accept it and be happy about learning with it. It's just about respect. That's how I see it. You're in Cyprus, we're a Christian country. You learn Christianity. You shouldn't offend you about you learning these things, because if we go to there, we're going to only do the same thing. So I like that answer a lot, to be honest. Do you have any questions from our audience?
The teacher in me noticed that Mike had his hand up ages ago, and he hasn't asked his question yet.
Had your hand up?
I know it was a bit. It was. No, I was gonna discuss private schools v public schools, but I'm not sure if we've got time. Don't know if
on the Brexit.
So since Brexit, I mean, a lot of the students that you have at your school, a few years ago, they obviously would aspire to go to the UK for studies. Has this changed now since Brexit? Do you have a lot more students going to Central Europe? Is it a lot more difficult for them to go to the UK? Do you promote it as it used to be promoted in Cyprus? Or, are people looking more towards Holland, France, maybe even the US?
It's a very good question. We used to have, like most private schools in Cyprus, most of our students used to do A-levels and go to the UK. That's becoming increasingly less, actually. And students, mainly financial, because we don't get the EU fees anymore going to the UK. And that will get worse and worse, because we have some students that had pre-settled status and all these other things, and those kind of loopholes are starting to close. We have, as a school, I think we've responded very well, because we saw it coming as soon as we knew about Brexit, and we put certain things in place. So firstly, we've acknowledged that the UK is unaffordable for many of our students, but with their A-levels and with their, very fluent, near-native English skills, they want to study in English. There's a lot of countries now where their universities have kind of realised this gap in the market, and they've got English-speaking degrees. The Netherlands is a big one. I mean, we had a high percentage of students go to the Netherlands last year. Ireland, obviously they speak English, but they're in the EU. Italy
Germany, I heard.
is good for medicine in particular. France, although their system's a bit different. So as a school, we've expanded our counselling team. So we've now got 3 academic counsellors whose sole role it is to support and, educate our students and their families from a young age about what destinations are open to them. We have an annual trip. So this year they're going to the Netherlands and Belgium, where they'll go and visit universities. Last year they did a similar trip, but they went to Ireland as well. So we take them to different universities in those countries. And because when you choose a university, as you know from going abroad to study, it's a lifestyle choice. Do you want a city university? Do you want rural? Do you want campus? So that's the first thing that we're doing as a school, is opening up the rest of Europe. And then, there's people going to the US. We had a student this year that got a scholarship to Princeton, full scholarship, which was incredible.
I wish I was a kid again, man.
Yeah.
We never
the future looks bright, doesn't it?
It just looks so good. I'm just so excited for this youth, because going to university before you've actually gone there. Like I was like, okay, I got crap grades. I can only go to this crap university. Pick one. There was no expansion before.
No, I think
so what
really
you're doing
important.
is brilliant.
I think where you go has a big impact on the friends you make and
sure.
how well you do. The second thing that we kind of recognized quite early on is that there were some students who would want to stay in Cyprus because of the fees, and also Greece has got lots of very good universities. The difficulty for our students is that obviously they're studying a British curriculum. So we launched actually 2 years ago something called the Greek Pathway. So our year 1s and year 2s and possibly year 3s, when they get to their A-level age, once they've done their GCSEs, instead of going on to do A-levels, they have the choice to study the Greek curriculum. So what they are essentially delivering in the public schools. we will be doing in those 2 years.
So
full
the
Greek
Bangibrius,
Yeah,
they're preparing
they
for
will
that.
sit there, the Bangibrius Exedasis, in year 7. So they can either, the 2 pathways that we identified as the most common for our students are either the sciences, because many of them go on to do medicine, or, you know, business, economics, accounting, and maths. They're the 2 most common routes for our students. So we will be delivering that. So when they are doing their GCSEs, they'll do the normal British curriculum, and then they'll say, actually, I want to study in Cyprus or in Greece, and the best way for me to get into those schools is to now switch to a Greek curriculum. They'll still be doing English, they'll still have, you know, high standard of English, that's one of the reasons that their parents send them to private school, but they will be covering the Greek curriculum. And that's something quite new that I don't think any other schools are doing. I mean, you've got private schools that have an English school and then a Greek school, but we've tried to kind of offer the best of both worlds so that that as many doors are open for as long as possible before they make that choice. So we're very excited about that one.
All right, cool, man.
Amazing.
What I'm listening to
It's been
is
great.
just hearing that everything is going towards comfort. Everything is trying to give out as much information and helping as much as possible. That's what I've understood from this podcast, that you're doing. You're going over and beyond what you need to in order to sustain that you have successful students who go through your school. Do you have any questions for our principal? You like that?
One question. So, it's actually a bit of a funny kind of question.
Yeah, we like this section. This is where
Alright,
we kind of
so-
ease to the end of it.
So, if you could organize a school field trip to any like fictional place, so say like Hogwarts or Narnia, where would you take the students? And what would be like the main attraction?
Great question, Costa. His questions are getting better.
Yeah.
They started terrible, but they're blowing me out of my mind now. So good job, Stella and Costa.
You could have given me a heads up on that one.
We have to put you on the spot a bit.
Does it have to be fictional?
No, I don't know.
Would it
It's
be-
Costa's
I mean,
question.
I would say space, which isn't really fictional. Isn't fictional at all. Although, clarify.
What do you know that we don't know?
No, I mean, it's not fictional, but there's a lot of fiction written around space, like, you know, Star Wars, Star Trek, lots of things. Because it's a place that we have so much kind of wonder, don't we, over. I would say space. Firstly, because if it's a school trip, I'm getting on that spaceship, so I can finally live those childhood dreams of going into space without having to spend like millions to Virgin.
Virgin Galactic.
Exactly. Secondly, I think any kind of travel for young people is really important, especially, you know, when we live in the little bubble that is Cyprus. We have a lot of international school trips, and it broadens your mind. It makes you realise how small we are, but in a good way. Not small as a country, but as people, and where we fit in the wider world. And I think going to space and seeing kind of Earth out of the window.
Humbling.
And yeah, I think it can.
Like all your problems are on
I
a
think
little
it
dot
would
of
be
this
incredibly educational, and it's a school trip that I would definitely sign up for.
We get it. You want to go to space.
It's never too late.
All right, amazing. I think we're going to end it on there.
Yep.
I wish we could go on forever. Honestly, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for putting yourself on the line. I know that as a principal and your status as well, these things can be quite daunting. Of course, like the feedback that you might get and backlash, but I believe
Oh
you
God, I hope not.
yeah, there's going to be a hell
The
of backlash.
future looks bright, man.
It does. I'm definitely more comfortable and more confident in what you guys are teaching. And
And I hope more schools take in the values that you guys are embracing
There's a
at
lot
your
of
school.
schools doing very good things in
Yeah.
Cyprus. I feel really positive about education in Cyprus and our young people.
Yep.
Definitely.
Amazing.
Very exciting.
you want to finish us off with like a little quote from the principal? Just look in the camera and just tell them what you want to tell the youth. just speak out
What's
to
your
your
message to the
students,
kids?
to your teachers, and just go on.
Why didn't you prepare me for this?
Because this is not about being prepared. You can't always do one
I'm
level
a teacher,
behind.
I'm a planner.
Yeah, I know, but face your fears. Look in the camera.
I think in terms of inspiring quotes, I don't think I need to say anything to our young people. I think they will change the world. I believe that they will change the world. definitely. And I can't wait. I'm looking forward
Such a
to
principle. I love it. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining in. Anything you got to say, Mike?
All good, man. It's been brilliant.
Thank
We'll
you for
definitely have you
having
back
me.
soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I would love to hit on some more subjects.
Get me on with Dr. Steph.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
wow.
wicked, actually.
Yeah,
Do a
we'll
double
be
episode.
standing there, though. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Another amazing podcast with a very special guest, our first ever female. Sorry for all the females that we didn't take so long to bring.
More
someone
to
on.
come.
Definitely more to come. Don't forget to like, subscribe. We've got TikTok now.
Yeah, we went
We're
to TikTok
We're
route
not
as well.
happy about it, but we're doing it.
Check us out on TikTok.
Don't forget to tell your and subscribe. Press the like button. It really helps us. And Pebble Jelly Media, as always, thank you so much for being behind all the cameras, the lighting and editing. These guys put a lot of effort in what we do. And, any sponsors out there that you want to be featured on, a little
Put you
halftime
on the links
break,
below.
definitely will really help us to improve what we have to do, because these guys do put a lot of hours and effort into it, and it's out of their goodwill and their time. Thank you for every single person that's joining in. We love you guys. Don't worry about the future, because it's looking bright. Purple Jelly Media, thank you again.
Peace out.
George, George, Principal Georgina, thank you so much. We love you. And yeah, have an amazing day.
Thank you.